Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome on in to the Steelers Hangover. My name is Andrew Wilbar. Glad to be filling in for Daniel J tonight, but happy to be joined, as always, by the legendary Shannn White. Shannn, it's always good talking football with you. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm the man, the myth, the legend, at least in my own mind. So
Hey.
I was looking forward to doing the show with Daniel tonight, and he had something come up, and I really appreciate you filling in.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the show. Today's topic is something that we're both very passionate about, and I think most Steelers fans are. And we're going to be discussing a lot tonight. Before anything, do want to remind you all to check out steelcurtainnetwork.com, where our editorial content can be found. Make sure you check out the Fans First Sports Network. I know that Shannn and I both have different areas where we contribute. I know Shannn has a lot of great original editorial stuff, and I've got a lot of draft content that's going to be coming out. So make sure you check out all of our work over at Steel Curtain Network and Fans First Sports. Let's start with the basics, Shannn. And I know that Art Rooney II had some interesting comments today, and there's a lot of things that you can take away from it. I would say the things everyone is talking about is obviously the quarterback position. His preference is to bring back at least one of Fields or Wilson, most likely going to be just one, no more than that. And of course, there's not going to be any major shakeups on the coaching staff. There could be a few, but nothing earth-shattering from the sounds of it. It doesn't sound like a whole lot's going to change. That could potentially move the needle. So, Shannn, what popped out to you in Rooney's comments, and where do you want to elaborate on the most?
Well, as you can tell from the title of tonight's podcast, we now know the Rooneys are delusional. Now, when the Art's brother got on there the other day and was defending the Steelers and how that we should be happy and satisfied that we're not whoever the worst teams in the league are every year, and that we're always above average, slightly, but above average, that we should be thankful. Well, then get rid of the standard is the standard slogan altogether, because that doesn't apply anymore. Today, there's so many things to talk about. With what Art II said today was infuriating for me. First of all, he said that Mike Tomlin was not the problem. He was not the issue. Well, I bet you there ain't another coach in the NFL that wouldn't love to have that scenario spoken by their owner, because the common denominator through all this is Mike Tomlin. Now, he said, look at all the games that Mike Tomlin's won. Yeah, he has won a lot of games, but how many titles? There's been to 2, and he won 1 because of an incredible play from Ben and Santonio Holmes and James Harrison, and we all remember. And then they lost another one. But Tomlin has not done anything when he's been on his own, other than not finish with a losing record. His scheme is archaic. His approach is, when you watch the 2 games this weekend, the 4 teams that were left, you see the Steelers are so far behind the times on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
And that is even with the highest paid defense in the NFL by a large margin. There is so many holes. He talked about the quarterback position. Well, I mean, if you watch the 4 quarterbacks this weekend, it only makes sense to bring back Justin Fields, because there's nothing that Jalen Hurts did this weekend that Justin Fields can't do. But the difference is, look at the talent surrounding Jalen Hurts. There's where Fields or any quarterback in Pittsburgh is not going to have. It's not even comparable. The Eagles are deep. They got the best running back in football. They got 2 of the best receivers. They got the tight end. They got an offensive line. Then you go on the defensive side, they got tons of young talent. The Steelers don't have that. The only place the Steelers are better is kicker.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, let's be honest. And he said, once they play the top of the line teams, they're found wanting. Rooney said that himself. Well, you're not going to make any changes. You're not going to, I mean, I don't want to automatically fire Mike Tomlin. I'm not that way. I believe you earn a certain amount of respect. But I think that the coordinators, it should be, the Rooney should say, this is changing. We're going to change. We're not getting yes men. And Mike Tomlin's not going to micromanage. His fingerprints are not going to be over both sides of the ball. And it definitely shouldn't be on the offensive side because he's so conservative. The stuff that was being done this weekend, some of the passes, as we see the RPOs and passes that's going between defenders' arms into heavy traffic, but they were big plays. You can always get a tip. They can always be a turnover, but they were aggressive. And that's how they got there. Washington turned the ball over, I think it was 3 times, and they got blown out. But, they got there by being aggressive. They were the best converting fourth downs of any team in the league. That's not playing in your fears, which Tomlin claims he doesn't, but he does. And then on defense, we see 0 blitzes. We see all this aggressive stuff that the Steelers would never do because they're too scared. They're just not set up for success in the modern era. And I know I've went on a little bit of a rant, but ever since I heard Art talking, and I've been so aggravated because we're going to play it back, Andrew. We're going to play it back. We're going to get another slightly above average season because the guys will try so hard. They go out there and they'll get that far, but then when they go up against the better teams, especially around the playoffs, they get killed. They're just not competitive. And if you change nothing changes.
I like what you're saying. And on both the ownership and coaching side for the Steelers, there's a lack of conviction. And when you look at the teams, the last 4 teams that were in it this year, you think of Philadelphia, you think of Washington, and obviously on the AFC side, you have Kansas City and Buffalo. Each of those teams, in terms of ownership that they have now in place, there was definite conviction behind the decisions that were made. You look at the offenses. I know that obviously the Steelers do need to do something on the defensive side of the ball. I understand that they got very vanilla as the year went on. I think Terrell Austin is a good defensive mind, especially in the secondary. He needs another pass rush coordinator to help him scheme up the front. They need to add something up front. But I think, especially on the offense side of the ball, it doesn't matter what type of offense you run, you have to add on to another innovator's type of playing. You think of even Kyle Shanahan, or one of the most respected offensive minds in football. His dad's style of offense was good for its time, but he didn't just try to replicate that. He added on to it. You think of in Kansas City with Andy Reid, and even to an extent Matt Nagy and the job he's done as offensive coordinator, regardless of who's calling plays, it's an add-on. They're always adding to what they've already had. The same thing can be said in Philadelphia. Buffalo, they had an okay offense when Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator, but it wasn't getting them over the hump. So what they do, they let Ken Dorsey go, and they brought in Joe Brady, who took that offense to the next level, reestablished their ground game. And the Steelers, they brought in these different guys that seem to have more credibility. I know Matt Canada didn't have a ton of credibility, but at least he had a couple ideas in college. Oh, the jet sweep. Well, okay, you can only do the jet sweep so much unless you actually add something to it and make it a little bit different. Arthur Smith. Okay, well, we saw the success that he had in Tennessee when he had Derrick Henry as his running back. Well, I'm sorry, but Najee Harris is not Derrick Henry. Without that type of game-changing running back, that scheme does not work. And even if you try to run the same thing, sooner or later, teams are going to catch up. We don't forget the fact that the Steelers had a good offense the first couple of games Russell Wilson was in, but they never added on to anything. There was nothing extra added on to it. And I feel like with Mike Tomlin, the biggest issue is his inability to add on. How deep is your playbook? How willing are you to get out of that comfort zone? And how much leeway are the Rooneys truly giving them? And I want to ask you this, Shannn, because I kind of went on my own rant there. I want to ask you your thoughts and as it pertains to ownership. If you think of the quarterbacks that these teams have, because obviously the Steelers at some point, they've got to get their quarterback. If Fields isn't the guy, then the following year they're going to have to address it in the draft. All these teams had conviction as it pertains to what they did, whatever it took to get the quarterback. Going up with Josh Allen, the Chiefs didn't even need a quarterback, But Brett Veach went to John Dorsey. John Dorsey goes to ownership, to the Hunts, and like, hey, this guy has a chance to be special. This is going to be a perfect fit with Andy Reid's offense. We think he's going to be a generational fit. Oh, we'll trade at 15 spots, even though we already have a solid NFL quarterback. We're going to trade up and go and get him. Jalen Hurts, a guy with a ton of upside. We think in this type of offense, even though it's an unpopular pick, even though we already have a proven guy at quarterback, because of the injury concern, we're going to bring him in and see what happens. And sure enough, he supplants the starter because of injury. The Steelers don't have that type of conviction inside their building with the ownership. And I believe is the biggest issue. The Rooneys do not have conviction. That could fall back on the fact AR2 just is not the same football guy that Dan Rooney was.
Not even close. The Steelers have really not been relevant since Dan passed. It's just, you see it just eroding. It's just going in the wrong direction. And I don't know what the answer is. I do know that every situation you talked about of these teams going out and finding their quarterback, even though they already had a quarterback at the time, they were innovative, creative, and they were proactive. They looked down the road and thought ahead. When they signed Pat Mahomes to that contract, what was it, $400 million, 10 years or something? Everybody's like $40 million, oh, that's great. I remember thinking,
10 years, $500 million.
Yeah, now it's a bargain. It's a bargain, and they're a Super Bowl contender every year.
Yep.
But they didn't just sit there. Look at the defense they built. When he first got there, it was offense.
Yep.
Tariq Hill and the young Kelsey and other guys. And then, but now, if they got that defense to go with it, they got great coaching. They got an offensive-minded coach. What we have with the Steelers is Tomlin, who's defensive-minded at best. But let's be honest. Let's watch Buffalo, okay? Buffalo had a few controversial calls, and I'll leave it at that. And they didn't make the Super Bowl again because it looks like the Kansas City's the NFL's favorite. If you watch that, who's the superstars on the Buffalo? Josh Allen. Who else?
Nobody.
What are they is well coached. They play together with great chemistry, and they're schematically superior. The second half, they would have won that game. I believe they went to the run. They stuck with the run. And then they let Allen make a big throw here and there, but mostly they ran the ball. And they were controlling that, got the lead, were controlling the game. And then I do not like the spot situation. Matt Bergen, who's the guy we've had on the shows before, he says he wants them to use the same technology with the football that they use in tennis. I don't know why they don't. Because then you could really tell how far that the ball actually, what yardage was gained. Because we were looking at a mass of humanity with 300-pound men. You can't tell sometimes, even though it looked like he got the first down. He definitely got farther than the guy that come in and marked it where he did. But what I'm saying is, we see a Buffalo Bills team with one real superstar, but a lot of good coaching, great chemistry, and great schematics on both sides of the ball. Whisper from going to the Super Bowl. Now, that gives us hope. The problem is, it isn't Terrell Austin. He's not that kind of coach.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely ain't Tomlin. And even if Arthur Smith comes back, he's not that kind of coach. Right. Arthur Smith was hired because his mindset fits Tomlin's mindset.
Exactly.
3 yards in a cloud of dust, 1980s football. I mean, it's not the modern game. That's why but then I feel bad for Arthur Smith because I think he wanted Justin Fields to remain his quarterback. And I said at the beginning of the year, this season, what they had to find out is it was either quarterback the answer. Because if not, you got to find one. And they did not figure out if either quarterback was the answer. They didn't give Fields enough opportunity, and then they took him out of there. And then I think Wilson answered that question by his play in the second part of the season. Now, it was not all Wilson's fault. The offensive line was exposed. Guys like McCormick is not a good zone blocker, and he's been forced to play as a rookie. You got in above his head. Samalu, I think, took a step back. You lost Daniels, of course. You're playing Broderick Jones out of position. And Dan Moore came back to reality. He sucked. So there's a lot of changes that's going to have to be made. They did not have the talent at wide receiver to really threaten anybody. It was like, you take Pickens away, they're done. Because there wasn't anybody else. And then the running backs, Harris is a tough guy. He should have never been a first-round pick. He doesn't have anything special. He doesn't have speed or burst. You watch Barkley and some of them runs he makes, you just dream about having that. The Steelers haven't since Willie Parker. I don't know. But they were so lacking in so many areas. But, they don't have the schematic or the talent. So I think it's going to take a while. And the way Art's talking, they're close. But I don't think you are.
I agree they're not that close. And this is not a knock. For any Steelers fans that are listening, I don't think this is a knock on the front office per se. I think they've done a very good job the last two drafts of bringing in guys that have brought in good talent. Now, the Kevin Colbert era definitely put them behind the eight ball. I do agree 100% with that.
At the end, it was awful. Yeah.
It was absolutely awful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what talent you bring in if you don't have the positional coaches or the coordinators that is going to develop that talent. The Steelers can bring in as many offensive linemen as they want and try to build it the same way they built it in Philadelphia, that when Weidl was in Philly. But if Pat Meyer can't coach these guys up and find a scheme that actually works and quit playing the players out of position, it doesn't matter how good you are. I like this point that Gavin Anthony makes. If Art Rooney II isn't a football guy, then just let the experts you hired run the team and supply the funds. The only problem is, if the guys that you hired to run the team aren't competent, it doesn't matter whether you let them run it or not. You're still going to come away with the same results. Maybe if we know the Rooneys aren't going to sell the team as much as, we may joke around about it, or, even I would be like, I honestly wouldn't hate that. You have to hire different advisors or something. If it's not working, you got to hire some people that can not just evaluate talent on the field, but evaluate front office talent, evaluate innovative coaching prospects. It's at all levels. It's not just at one level of this organization. There's problems. It's not all on Tomlin, but part of it is. It's not all on the coordinators, but part of it is. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it falls on ownership as well.
But why would anybody who's the top coordinator, let's say, that is in demand, want to come to Pittsburgh? Okay, you got ownership that has the smallest coaching staff in the NFL. They pay Tomlin, but the other guys don't make much. And that there is no cap. There's no salary cap on coaches. It's just the Rooneys are tight.
Yep, exactly.
They're frugal. Okay. Then the facilities, they were one of the lowest facilities, according to the players when they voted. So they're not putting a lot of money in the facilities either. Okay, you don't have a quarterback to build around. You don't have offensive talent, skill position to build around. You don't have an offensive line. And your defense is overpaid and old. They're getting old fast.
Yep.
And Andy Weidl and Mark Hunt, as you say, have done a good job trying to replenish. But when you got that many holes and you're throwing so much money to players that really need to be elsewhere so they can have a chance to win a title, and you use that draft capital to, get some more younger guys and use that money that you're throwing at these older guys to pay some younger talent, maybe young free agents, bring them in. They're going about it all wrong. They're still coaching, and they're still running ownership, so running everything, the operations, like they're this close to being a Super Bowl team, where I think they're this far from being a championship team. And those two things cannot go together. You can't have a true rebuild when you always say we're reloading. Remember, they used to say the reloading stuff all the time, which was total crap. Now, hopefully they figured out this ain't reloading. This is a rebuild. And let's say they go out and they can get a quarterback. There's some sneaky good quarterbacks in this class you could get in a middle round. That if you had the right people, you might get developed. You might get lucky. You get a Dak Prescott type, or you know what I mean. Somebody that ain't a first round pick. Hurts was second round. You know what I mean. But is there anybody in Pittsburgh that can develop a quarterback? No.
No.
I mean, look at Kenny Pickett. Don't throw an interception. Don't turn the ball over. You can't have a guy thinking about everything he can't do. He needs to be thinking about what he can do to win the game, score points. But Tomlin he thinks defensive minded, and he thinks conservative. It's not the proper environment for any top coordinator. Because if you're on offense, you're going to be handcuffed. If you're on defense, you're going to be told what to do. No, who wants to come to Pittsburgh?
And that's one reason why I don't think that as much blame as much as I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Arthur Smith, I don't think as a whole lot of blame necessarily falls at his feet, nor does it necessarily on Terrell Austin, because I think both of them to an extent have been handcuffed by Mike Tomlin's philosophy of playing conservative. I mean, can you imagine the Kansas City Chiefs going into a game and Andy Reid talking to Patrick Mahomes before the game, say, "Hey, I just don't want you to throw any interceptions today. Just make sure you don't throw any interceptions." Can you imagine that?
It wouldn't happen. I mean, every quarterback, Daniels, who's a fine young player, he was my highest rated quarterback coming out last year.
Yep, same.
Well, I liked him better than Williams by a long margin.
Yes.
I mean, he don't paint his nails. He don't cry in his mommy's lap. He's got leadership skills. He's even more mobile. I really like Daniels. And he was the offensive rookie of the year. You have Hurts, who did nothing spectacular yesterday at all. He's in control of that offense. I mean, it's just control. It's calm confidence and control. And they just destroy people. Then you got Mahomes, who's the best quarterback, and he does. And then you got Josh Allen. Guess what they all can do? RPOs, and they play like a point guard. You got to have guys that can think on the move in heavy traffic, in congestion. You can't put your head down and try to start running. You got to keep your eyes up, look down the field. You got to be confident in your own abilities and your own mobility. Now, if your coach is telling you don't make any mistakes before you even go out there, how confident are you going to be?
We still have a lot more that we're going to get to on this topic, and we have other stuff we're going to get to. But real quick, we're going to go ahead and take our break for those that are on the audio side. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Make sure that you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever a new video is live. So don't go anywhere, Steelers fans. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back to the Steelers Hangover. Andrew Wilbar filling in for Daniel J tonight, along with Shannon White, talking about ownership within the Pittsburgh Steelers. What a fun topic. One that we did not talk a whole lot about, but talking about, Shannon, you were the one who kind of brought this idea up and how we know the Rooneys are delusional. And I think it's a very interesting topic. Bring up this comment from Afton Forehead. Says, and I think that's what Field lacks. Shannon, your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly. We don't know. That's what I wanted to know. That's why I wanted to see him play more. I did not want the change to be made when it was made because we know what Wilson is. We know his limitations, and eventually we saw both sides, the good and the bad and the ugly. The problem is what I said, if everybody remembers, when Wilson come in, he don't have the receiver talent, the skill position talent that he had in Seattle. It was obvious that the running game was not going to be able to do what we wanted it to do this year with the guys they had. So I wanted him to stick with Fields because I think Fields can do the RPOs. He has the athleticism. He has all that. But again, he was with a terrible Chicago team. For everybody out there that disagrees with me and thinks that Williams is the best thing since sliced bread, well, he didn't look all that great.
No.
And that was with the new coordinator, new coach, everything, which they're already gone. But I think Fields could do it. But I think that when he was in there, he was so timid. I see Fields do some incredible things in Chicago.
Yep.
Houdini acts to make big plays. We didn't see him because he wasn't that confident in Pittsburgh. He was trying not to make mistakes. Now, he threw one interception in 6 games, I think it was. And I think he might have had 1 or 2 fumbles, but a couple of them were bad snaps where they wasn't on the same page. But, I mean, he really protected the ball. But that was not his MO. His MO has always been that he turns the ball over. So he wasn't playing confidently and freely. And we, more so than the record this year, I thought they needed to progress in this rebuild by figuring out what they actually had at quarterback. And in the end, they didn't figure out nothing.
Here's an interesting thought for not just the quarterback situation, but even for the head coaching situation in Pittsburgh. I wrote an article about how the Steelers and Mike Tomlin would both be better off by parting ways. And what I was saying by that was, if from a Steelers perspective, Mike Tomlin is not a bad football coach, but he is an intellectual. He does not believe he can be proven wrong. And because of that, he is unwilling to get away from his traditional philosophy. He believes that that's the way to do it, and that's the only way he knows how. So that's the only way he's comfortable in trying to perform. But if you do compare him to the situation in Andy Reid, I mean, if Andy Reid would have just stayed in Philly for all those years, would he have ever won a Super Bowl?
No.
I don't know if he would have. But what a shakeup like that does to a coach is that it forces you, regardless of how good of a coach and how well respected you are within the league, it forces you to reassess how you are running things as a coach. Okay, what am I doing? It gives you a chance to just look back at your whole career and to say, okay, what needs to change? Andy Reid has added so much to his offense in Kansas City, not just because of Patrick Mahomes. He added stuff even before Mahomes. He continued to add on and build to get him to the point where they are at now. Maybe a shakeup for Mike Tomlin forces him to reconsider his overall philosophy, shake things up within his own philosophy, and move forward, get with the times, because he's gotten comfortable in Pittsburgh. He knows that the ownership is behind him. What?
Too comfortable.
Exactly, too comfortable. And what a shakeup does that, it makes him uncomfortable. It makes you a little bit more willing to take some risks. And that's exactly what Tomlin needs. And if you're a Steelers fan, you may have to be willing to, there's no guarantee you hire the right guy in the first opportunity. But if you look at it from this perspective, the Steelers are not going to win a Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin, the status quo, which I don't think the Steelers are very close to winning one right now with Mike Tomlin. I don't think Mike Tomlin's, obviously, he's just as far away. Tomlin goes elsewhere. Let's say he would have taken the Bears job, or even the Saints job is still open right now. Let's say he went to a position like that. He gets this gem of a quarterback, and they're able to turn that franchise around. Maybe Mike Tomlin has the capability of being a Super Bowl winning coach. He's won a Super Bowl before. It's been a long time, but he has won one. There's that chance that as a Steelers fan, you have to be willing to accept that Mike Tomlin might win a Super Bowl before you do. But ultimately, if you're still going to, in the process, win more Super Bowls without Mike Tomlin than you win with Mike Tomlin, even if Mike Tomlin has more success than you have when you part separate ways, it's still the best decision for you to make as a franchise because it's still helping you get to that next level. Even if Mike Tomlin would have more success than you, it's still not, if you keep the status quo, you're going to get the same result over and over. So I'm fine with taking the risk of Mike Tomlin maybe being more successful away from the Steelers than the Steelers are without him, if that means the Steelers at some point finally get over the hump and get to and win a Super Bowl.
Sometimes separation can be mutually beneficial. And that's where the Steelers are right now. I'll say it now, and I'll eat humble pie, and I'll go on any podcast and admit it if I'm wrong. But the Steelers will never win another Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin. I do not think he's capable of change. His level of stubbornness is beyond belief. Bill Kyer won a Super Bowl because he got Ben Roethlisberger. Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl because he inherited Ben Roethlisberger. Neither guy would have had a Super Bowl. And I don't see Tomlin going anywhere else and winning a Super Bowl unless he's willing to change, which I don't think he can, and he could have the proper coordinators that he needs, plus a superstar quarterback. And the word it is right now, Steelers have none of that. None. So, I mean, I thought for sure they would be a scapegoat or two. They would be some changes that we could look at. And, Philipponi came out last night. It said, tune in at 2:00. There's going to be big changes. I got inside information. And it was more nothing. A huge nothing burger. And I'm like, man, that's what I expected all along.
Yep.
It just, I mean, I'm a creature of habit. I don't like change. But my gosh, this is ridiculous. They keep sending out the same stuff, just with different names on the back and getting the same results, and they won't do anything about it.
And the national media loves what Pittsburgh's doing because they have so much respect for Mike Tomlin, yet they're pounding the Dallas Cowboys for their hiring of Brian Schottenheimer. And it's like, hang on here. You're settling for mediocrity in Dallas and you're pounding them. Yet the Steelers are doing the exact same thing. And you're saying, oh, the Steelers are such a great organization because they stick with Mike Tomlin, who's such elite coach. Well, then why are you pounding the hiring of Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas? Because that sounds like a very similar type of hire.
Yeah.
I did want to bring up this one comment that John S. mentioned. He mentioned a comment I had made with Jeremy Betts on the Q&A, Taylor Eldersma. I just wrote up a scouting report on him for the website. He's a Canadian quarterback from Laurier, I believe is the name of where he played Canadian football. He is at the Senior Bowl this week, 6'4", 213. He's got a good arm. Keep an eye on him this week at the Senior Bowl. But as we kind of bring all this to a climax with the Rooneys, is there anything else outside of no major coaching changes? Obviously, we've talked about the quarterback situation some. Was there anything else specifically that you wanted to hone in on as it pertains to Rooney's comments that took place today?
Well, he mentioned a few things I agree with. Probably one quarterback could be brought back. I think it would be Fields, because if you bring him back and he flames out, and as Afton and we were talking earlier, if he doesn't have that point guard mentality, that quick processing, and he can't do it, then the Steelers record will be worse. The non-losing season streak should be over, and they won't have to give up quite as much to move up to maybe get a quarterback in next draft. So I kind of agree with that. He definitely mentioned wide receivers, which they definitely need 2 or 3. A huge upgrade there. One would be addition by subtraction, because everybody knows how I feel about Pickens. I'm done with it. I'm done. Running back, they got to get the speed, baby. I mean, if you look at Gibbs, you look at Barkley, you look at Henry, you look at any of these top running backs, they got burst, they got speed, they can make big plays with their legs. Steelers don't have it. Warren to a point, but Harris has got to go. They got to finish the line, whether it's a new offensive line coach. They got to strengthen that. Make sure that the talent fits the scheme and vice versa, which right now it doesn't. Put Broderick Jones on the left, and please, for the love of Pete, let the Dan Moore experiment be over. Now, on defense, he mentioned it. They got to get better on the defensive line. They get pushed around by the better teams. The stronger lines push these guys around. Hayward does not want to be on the interior. He likes playing in. Benton needs to replace Ogunjobi, and they need some mass on the inside. So that's somewhere they need to focus in the draft. I don't think there's any free agents I'm seeing that I think would be the answer, but there is in the draft. Linebackers, if you look at a lot of these teams now, they got great lines. They got great secondary. Linebackers are kind of an afterthought. They're getting good play from guys who make mass tackles, like Braun with the Eagles and, Bolton with the Chiefs. I mean, these guys are good, but they're great because of what they got in front of them. So I think the linebackers, you could be okay with what you got, but they got to improve the secondary. And they got to improve the scheme. You cannot play 7-8 yards off the way they keep doing repeatedly, and it gets destroyed. They talk about there at the goal line. Well, you can't play so far back because the guy's got a free release. He can break out.
Yep.
He can break in. It's impossible. Steelers do it all the way down the field, the whole way. And they call that man, off man. It's ridiculous. Who else does that? They might do it on one side, but they got protection over the top if they got a real fast or dangerous guy. But they don't do it all across the board. The Steelers do. It drives me crazy. So, but I agree with it. They've just got things they need to focus on. And I don't think this is the year per se to go high for a quarterback, but you might can find a guy, as we said, in the middle round. But the problem is who's going to develop him? You cannot develop a young quarterback by telling him protect the ball, be careful. I mean, it just isn't realistic. So, but yeah, I'll sum it up is I was not happy with what Rooney said, but it didn't shock me.
As it pertains to the defensive line, one thing that I would like to see this offseason, I haven't done all my evaluations on defensive line yet. My rankings are still changing. But you mentioned moving Keanu Benton to defensive end, replace Ogunjobi, putting more mass in the middle. This is for being a bad draft class overall, and this draft class is very weak compared to the last few, compared to the next couple. The next two drafts look really, really good. This draft is very weak at just about every position except running back and maybe tight end. Defensive line is pretty good as well, though. And interior defensive line, you got guys, you got Deion Walker from Kentucky. He's more of a two-down player, but that man can stuff the middle. Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Go ahead and ask Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins how he does. I know he had Mason Graham next to him, but he didn't have much else going right for him on that defense with all the injuries and everything else that took place. And Kenneth Grant is a man's man on that inside, 330 pounds, 6'3", 6'4". He'd be great along the interior in Pittsburgh. But I do want to get to a couple questions here. I will say, free agent assigning, not going to be a huge difference maker, but Chase Young, if he doesn't have to be a full-time starter and you can move him around, whether it be as maybe you move him inside as a 5-tech and you're in your base D when you have to spell someone, and then maybe even on early downs if you have to spell a linebacker, place him as an oversized stand-up linebacker, move him around a little bit, and see if you can get some value out of a guy like Chase Young, who's going to be a free agent this year, not going to be overly expensive. I think he'd be a good depth piece that you could play behind that, assuming you draft somebody as well. I'm not saying just go after Young. You draft somebody as well, but I think he would be a good fourth rotational guy that you can get a lot of value out of. But Shannon, John asks you a question. How would this team be How would this team be with the Lions coaching staff? I don't think they go further. Your thoughts?
Yeah, again, it's the whole thing. It's the whole organizational front office, from ownership to your GMs to your coach to your coordinators. The Lions are just better than the Steelers in every position, talent-wise. Schematically, they were better. If the Steelers, let's look at the Lions lost Hutchinson. I think they was at one point 10 guys that they projected to be starters that they had lost for multiple weeks, if not the season. And they still made it to where they did and had the best record or tied for the best record. The Steelers can never do that. As somebody said earlier, without Watt, Steelers can't win. That's the problem, guys. You can't be that reliant on any one player. You have to have a scheme in place that can at least be functional without a top player. And the Steelers have showed that without Watt, they're pitiful. They're one of the worst teams in the league. But there was times in the last few games that I felt like I was watching one of the worst teams in the league. Not one of the teams that was contending for a playoff position. And that's sad. I mean, yesterday, the play at the end of the game there where Allen threw the ball and the tight end had a chance to catch it, even though it was a fluttering duck, it looked like a bad punt coming down. He still could have caught it. And he missed it. And then I thought back at the end of that Bengals game, if Freiermuth would have caught that pass from Wilson and been able to get him in that field goal range, because I think he would have got there, I believe Boswell makes it. And then it might have been a little bit of a different story, and they could have got a little momentum and maybe had a little bit of better playoff performance. But it just seems like that they cannot get out of this roller coaster of ineptitude and mediocrity. And that's why I wanted to see some changes that we haven't seen.
Here's another question. This comes from Afton. Oh, never mind. You got a super chat. Hang on. All right, go for
it. Sean Manahan says, been saying for years we need a true nose tackle like Casey Hampton. You just kept saying I was wrong until now. Well, I don't know if I said you was wrong, but I might have. You never know. The modern game has changed to a point to where you do have so much of your RPOs and the mobile quarterbacks. And if you got a guy in the interior that really is just there to tie blockers, a lot of times you're going to leave some big running lanes. So I was okay on long downs and distances, having a guy like Hayward slide in or Benton, and then have your edge guys. But we see the Steelers giving up big chunk plays on first and second downs this year, two teams that were good running teams. Now, when they went in the game, the first Baltimore game, to shut Henry down, they were blitzing through with Queen and with Wilson, with Roberts. They were attacking, and the Ravens wasn't prepared for that. Well, we seen the Ravens after that started RPO, and Lamar would watch to see what was going to happen, and they kept flowing to Henry, and then Jackson would just keep the ball and, throw it down the field. And then, of course, in the playoffs, he ran with it a lot. So sometimes you got to change up, change your scheme, change, your focus from one game to the next. Well, the Steelers are so predictable at times that they fell right into the Ravens' hands. And the Ravens ain't that creative. They just got a freaking quarterback. I mean, the guy can do things nobody's been able to do. But I just feel like that the nose tackle is a position now. We've seen the running game come back this year. Now look at the value of a Barkley, a Henry, whatever running backs you want to say. All these teams have got some pretty good running games. So we're seeing a return to that. Well, that's going to bring back the importance of a nose tackle as well.
And you think of the guys in the league, Dexter Lawrence, Vita Vea.
Yeah.
These guys are Jordan Davis. I mean, the great game that he had this past week. I mean, these guys matter more than what the national media makes you think. I did want to ask you, Afton had asked if the tiny coaching staff is Rooney's doing or Tomlin's. I think this falls more on Rooney. Would you agree?
Yes, because it was like it before Tomlin came along.
I agree with that. And you don't have a salary cap, like you mentioned earlier. You don't have a salary cap for coaches, and that is the one thing. It's the same thing in baseball, except with the whole entire team. You wonder why the Pirates are so bad. Yet the Pirates, I understand they're not as big of a market of some other teams, but at the end of the day, you still have an owner that has enough money. If he wanted to win, he could put more money out there and lure more guys in. Money talks. Just my opinion. But Shannn, I did want to ask you a little bit as we pertain more to draft needs. We already talked about a wide receiver a little bit. What I'd like to do at wide receiver, and I don't have a strong opinion on George Pickens either way because I don't really like either option. I don't think his trade value is incredibly high, and I just don't know what the Steelers do in the meantime if you let him go. But at the same time, I understand the frustrations and just his immaturity. If the Steelers do keep Pickens, the free agent I would like the Steelers to go after would be Amari Cooper. He is a pro's pro. He's been there. He's done it. He's been one of the least diva receivers in the league, despite being in some pretty rough circumstances in Cleveland and Dallas. He's been in several locker rooms with a lot of drama, and he's been a quiet presence. He's still got a lot of good football in him. I know Buffalo didn't use him a whole lot down the stretch, but you watch him earlier this year in Cleveland before the injury. He was still a really good receiver. He has a number one receiver potential still, and in Pittsburgh, if you are holding on to Pickens, he doesn't have to be the one. But the Steelers keep trying to bring in these low-end twos they hope can be a two, but end up being a three, like a Mike Williams or, even a Van Jefferson. These guys that really aren't twos, but they try to make him into that. Amari Cooper, can be that guy for you. That can be a consistent presence on the outside. And then you're not forced to, if the right receiver isn't there in the draft, get one. If you can, though, one player I do love, though, Shannn, is Luther Burden in the first round. I think he'd be a great fit in this offense. He's explosive. He's tough in big catch situations. I like him. I don't know if there's any receivers you've looked at yet, but as it pertains to receiver, that's obviously a need. Is there anywhere else in the offense? I think I would assume we'd agree running back. You probably bring in another guy in the middle rounds.
Yeah, running back, there's a couple of guys, second or third round. I don't want to go first. As you say, defensive tackle, a top corner if he was to fall, or a wide receiver, I think would be your focus in the first. Borden, I agree with you. I'm just now getting into some of my, like I said, getting ready for my draft evaluations. I usually pick 10 to 15 guys as targets for the Steelers. There's a couple of guys that people are mentioning as standing out at the senior. Is it Senior Bowl or East-West Bowl? What is the practices going on right now?
Senior Bowl.
Senior Bowl. There's a few receivers there that are really standing out. One kid, he's a white guy, and he runs real crisp routes, gets good separation. He looks like a good slot guy. And then there's another young man, and both of them, from what I'm hearing, really good attitudes. I don't want any more first round guy, but he fell in the second because of his attitude. That's George Pickens. That's Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson. I don't want no more of them. Give me guys that are ballers. Give me a Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. I would say they know Larry Fitzgerald's anymore or Hines Ward's, but you know what I mean. Get the ball players, the guys that care. I mean, I've even been shocked, to be honest, that A.J. Brown has been so kind of, he don't seem real happy, even though they're in the Super Bowl, because he ain't putting up the numbers he's put up in past seasons. To me, it's all about winning. If you win the Super Bowl, people know how good he is. They just haven't had to throw the ball as much this year because the running game's been so great. But when he's got opportunities, he's still making big plays. That's being a team first guy. But I just think that the Steelers got to get back to getting the right talent that matches up scheme, but they got to get the right character that matches up with culture.
I agree with that. And if you look at the running back position in general, we talk about all the time, you don't draft running backs that high. You don't need to draft them in the first round. There's so many, they grow on trees practically. There are 35 running backs at least in this draft, Shannon. And I'm not joking with this, that you could argue deserve to be drafted. Every team in the NFL could draft a running back this year, and there would still be running backs that would go undrafted that deserve to be drafted. That's how deep this class is. There's every type of running back you're looking for. If you're looking for a scat back, speed back, power back, doesn't matter what you need. There is a running back for everyone in this draft. And I guess another question that's worth asking, if James Daniels leaves, because Seumalo took a step back, do you see interior offensive line being a position the Steelers would address in the draft at some point? Or do you think they address it another way in terms of their depth? Do you think they're fine there? I think we both like Mason McCormick and his upside for the future. Mm-hmm. What is your evaluation of the interior of the line? Or is there anywhere else on the offensive side of the ball the Steelers can improve on this year?
Well, there's really, other than center, other than center, I don't think there's any place on offense you can't upgrade. I'm just be honest. To me, Frazier was the best lineman for the Steelers. It has been Daniels, but of course he was out injured. But to me, Frazier was easily the best lineman. And Seumalo, surprisingly enough, was asked to attend the Pro Bowl as an alternate. And I'm like, dang. I mean, I remember Tyler Huntley went to the Pro Bowl, when he filled in there a little bit for Lamar Jackson. But he wasn't even that good. He only played like 4 or 5 games. That's the biggest surprise to me that Seumalo was invited, because I think Seumalo took a big step back. I think that Daniels now might become more of a priority but I think somebody's going to throw money at him because he has been consistent. It would not shock me. I don't know, me and you haven't talked about this. Now, me and Big G have a lot. It would not shock me to see them consider moving Fautanu to guard and maybe picking up a right tackle. Now, this draft, there is a few mid-round right tackles that might be serviceable. Like I said, I don't have all the names in front of me, but I'm not into that part of it yet. But you can get by. Look at some of the teams this year. Was it Rosen, whatever for the Ravens? I can't think of his name. Rosengarten. There's different guys that you could get in the 3rd or 4th round that can be a serviceable right tackle. And especially if you strengthen who you have playing at guards. Let's say you move McCormick, you have Fautanu on both sides of Frazier. That's going to take care of your interior. And then hopefully Broderick Jones could flourish on the left side. But, I mean, is it going to matter if they keep running their scheme? Maybe it'll be better if they put a running back that fits the scheme. So, again, we're just going to have to see how this plays out.
It's going to be interesting for sure. And one other thing as it pertains to the draft, you were mentioning there just a minute ago, you're talking about offensive tackles. Cameron Williams is a guy from Texas who has a ton of talent. I was expecting him to return to school. He came out, if you're looking on the interior of the line, Armand Bembao from Missouri is a guy with a ton of upside. He's one of the most physically gifted linemen in this draft. And there is a good bit of depth at guard and tackle. And usually I'm not a fan of waiting on the offensive line, but this year it's so untop heavy. That's where the sweet spot is, really, that second, third round, maybe even into the fourth round a little bit, is where you can get quality offensive line this year. I will say, if Broderick Jones is not playing left tackle next year, I'm going to lose my ever-loving mind with what the Steelers are doing with this. His issue is the feet. The footwork will be fixed if you just move him to the left side.
Yeah. Oh, it's
it
ridiculous.
Really is.
And to watch him, and he seems lost at times. He'll get out and have an opportunity to crush a corner, and he'll never even, you have to get low and leave your feet and drive the guy into the ground, and he'll miss him altogether, or it look like he's going to pick up a blocker on somebody to block on down the field, and that's the guy who makes the tackle. It's like he's just, nothing feels natural to me. Nothing feels natural watching him play the right side.
Some of the key free agents, and we'll close with this question, Shannon. I've got some key free agents the Steelers have coming this offseason, not talking about the quarterbacks. Mike Williams, James Daniels, Dante Jackson, DeMonte KZ, Cameron Sutton. Out of those guys, which ones are you bringing back?
Okay. Cam Sutton, bye-bye. That was a disaster. That did not work. So Sutton could go. Daniels, I would consider, but I think he's going to cost too much.
Yep.
Jackson, I did not like his effort late in the year. I think that it was a little bit of self-preservation. I like Steeler corners who are more aggressive tacklers. At the end of the year, Porter's tackling improved, and Trice was the best tackler of all the corners. So hopefully he can have a little health next year. Who else was it?
Got DeMonte KZ. One that I forgot to mention was a Landon Roberts. I know you're a big fan of Roberts.
I love Roberts. I like him for depth. I like him for he sets a tone, a physical tone, and he loves being a Steeler. And he plays like a Steeler, so I like him. Kazee, I've not been a huge fan of. I think the safety position needs upgraded. Elliott, great play. Played great prior to the injury. But what they're going to do with Fitzpatrick, I'm not sure. Because now it's gotten, the excuse that people are avoiding him. I think that went out the window when we see people target him. So I don't know if trying to fill in for Terrell Edmonds and be more of a physical presence if he didn't kind of wear himself down. And I don't know if he's the same player anymore.
And then Mike, did you mention something about Mike Williams?
No, I didn't want him to bring Mike Williams in when they did. So
yeah,
I'm fine with him leaving.
Well, those are the key ones that I want to mention. It is interesting because we agree on just about all of them. The Steelers, some of these free agents they brought in, not that Dante Jackson was necessarily a bad acquisition for a year, considering that they were just getting rid of Deontay Johnson. I was fine with it at the time. I thought he provides some value, but I think the Steelers can do better there. I will say one corner to keep an eye on. That's the last name I'm going to mention in the show is Jedi Barron, Texas cornerback. I don't like Big 12 cornerbacks, so now they're in the SEC, so I don't have to have that rule with Texas corners. But Jedi Barron, I tell you what, this guy's got some intriguing traits. He reminds me a lot of Joe Hayden. He's got good instincts. He plays the ball well. He's smart. I think that he's a guy that has some intriguing upside. If he's available on day 2, could be an interesting option for the Steelers. Has some schematic versatility as well. Can play him at nickel, can play him at safety, can play him outside. It's a player I really like in this draft so far.
Are you as high on Kobe Bryant out of Kansas as everybody else is?
I'm not. I'm suspicious that he's going to run a really slow 40 compared to what people think.
Yeah, I think he will. Yeah, I think he'll run a slow, maybe even close to 4.6.
Yep.
To me, he looks more Willie Gay than he does. But he does seem to have the instincts and that little bit of craftiness to be physical and get away with it. He seems like he's intelligent. So depending on where you get him, to me he'll fall into a later round because of that, the lack of speed. But he's a guy that I do like his physicality to be no bigger than he is.
I think he could be in consideration to move to safety as well. That could be an option too for him.
Yeah.
But Shannn, anything else you want to add? Anything else you want to plug before we get on out of here?
Well, I'm going to love the Steelers like I know we all will, regardless. I get frustrated. With ownership in this case. And when I think they need to step and put this situation, get it under control, do what needs to be done. But it's got to quit raining at some point, right? The sun will shine again, and they will make better decisions. And you get the right running back, you get the right scheme, and find you a quarterback, and maybe they can be relevant again. But I wouldn't expect anything real quick.
100%. Be sure to hit the like button on your way out. As Afton mentioned, thank you all so much for listening. We had a fun show today. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, make sure you drop a like, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever a show is live. And if you're listening on podcast platforms, wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe there as well. And make sure you check out our shows with me and Jeremy, the Draft Dynasty podcast on Fridays on the Fans First feed, as well as the Steelers Fix on Thursday. Make sure you check out Shannn on all of the great stuff he does here at the website as well. It's been a fun one, Steelers fans. Thank you so much for listening in. We will see you next time.